Hello, everyone, and welcome to Level the Field Leadership. My name is Dr. Rachel Gallardo, and as always, I'm very thankful that you have decided to listen in on today's episode. I do believe that it's important for us to have tools in our toolkit so we can level the field of challenges that we encounter in the work environment, because quite frankly, you never know when it's going to come up. I also believe that workplace burnout is very real, and anything we can do to reduce burnout and fatigue in our leadership roles will have a positive impact on our teams, on us as leaders, on us whenever we go home. And so it's all connected, right? If this is your first time, I just want to say welcome. I'm so very thankful that you have found this show. Either a friend referred you or you're just kind of doing some searches. But if this is not your first time, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to listen in again. And I hope that this episode continues to bring you value, as I'm sure some of the other episodes have as well. If you are not new to the vibe that we've got going on here, I'd like to base everything off of scripture and just things that are going on in my own life. That's where I get a lot of my inspiration from for these episodes, to be honest. And today I'm reminded of Proverbs 29:11. A fool gives full vent to his anger, but a wise man holds it back. Now, I would love to be able to say that I have never been the fool, but there have been plenty of times that I have been the fool. So if the only person that needs to hear this message is for me, then I will make sure that I listen to it whenever I know that I need to think about what it is that I'm about to do, especially when it's a situation that I'm not really all that happy about. So let's get into it. Today's topic is all about how to respond, not react. So, like I said in the opening, a lot of people remember less about the problem itself and more about how you, as their leader, behaved in the moment. Now, remember, you don't have to have a title to be a leader. You don't need some schmancy office in the corner to signify that you're a leader. Even if you don't necessarily have the title or have anybody reporting to you, you are still a leader in a lot of ways and shapes and forms. And so how you choose to respond to different situations says a lot about you as a person as well. Now, the difference between reaction and responding is that reaction is immediate. Oftentimes, it is very emotionally driven, and it's a part of your automatic behavior. Whereas if you are responding to a situation, it's very intentional. You've had some thoughtful alignment because you want to make sure that however you choose to respond aligns with your overall values, your goals, and what you're trying to accomplish for the future. So reaction is often emotion based. Response is often very intentionally based. So if you don't listen to any other part of this episode, I hope that you walk away with that item. Now, I do want to say that stress can activate our threat detection systems that are there in your brain. So from an IO standpoint, we're always looking at those psychological principles and how they relate to people and how it relates to the workplace. So if you are curious about this whole stress activation system, I want to encourage you to go check out episode 66 because I talk a lot about the impact of stress on your leadership. But basically, your brain is constantly just trying to keep you alive. And it wants to make sure that you are moving to the next thing because from our ancestral perspective, we never knew when the next saber-toothed tiger was going to attack us in the cave. So we had to deal with things immediately so we could then be prepared for whatever next threat might be occurring. So when we talk about emotional regulation, this is going to allow us as leaders to engage higher order thinking processes. And this includes problem solving, perspective taking, and strategic judgment. The problem is, if you let yourself be dictated by emotions, you're not going to be able to have the ability to regulate to then do those critical thinking components. All right. So there's a few points here that I want to make sure that we get out of this episode. So I'm going to go ahead and dive into point number one. Item number one is that effective leaders know how to recognize their emotions without allowing their emotions to dictate behavior. Now, whenever I'm teaching on this topic in my class, I always let my students know that if people can control your emotions, they can control you. So we want to keep that in mind. I know I don't want anybody manipulating me, so I want to make sure that I'm keeping my emotions in check so that way I can be the most effective. I can really think through the situation. Now, this does not mean that you turn into a sociopath. That doesn't mean that we get rid of our emotions or we become robotic. Having emotions is okay, but as the leader, you need to recognize what that emotion is so you can then move in a strategic direction in a way that aligns with your core values. Okay. So let me give you an example. Let's say somebody on your team sends you an email and says, you know what, I know we had this deadline for Friday at 5 o'clock, but I'm not going to meet the deadline. I'm not going to be able to get it to you until Wednesday. You have got, you've got two options here. You can react to the situation. So the reactive response is that become a keyboard cowboy and you start typing away your message and how come this happened? You start blaming other people and demanding explanations and, you're just going to light your torch and go to that person's office. Or you can have more of a responsive approach. So you're going to pause. You're going to take a moment to kind of think about, okay, what else could have been going on? Was there something I missed? Was there something I didn't clearly communicate? Why is it that this wasn't communicated sooner? And so you take a moment to just kind of think about it. If that means that you just don't respond to the email until the next day, then so be it. Maybe that's a good time for you to go for a walk. Maybe that's a good time to go get another cup of coffee. Maybe you need to go take your lunch break. Put some sort of barrier before you send that response, because let's think about it. And I want you to be honest with yourself. How many leadership decisions have you regretted because they were made too quickly under pressure? I'll wait because I'm sure that you got them. If you look at research in the field of neuroscience, it does say that emotions and cognition do work together for decision making, and cognition is a fancy word for thinking. So emotions and thinking do work together when we talk about decision making. And whenever you have this high emotional arousal, it's going to narrow your attention, it's going to reduce your focus, which means it's going to reduce the ability for you to strategically think, particularly in situations that are uncertain. Okay. So leaders who know how to regulate their emotions are actually going to be more effective under stress. So the more calm you can remain in the situation, the better your ability to make decisions. If you think about it, we've all listened to those, or me personally, I like to watch those like Who Did It and Forensic Files and, Dateline. And, you hear those 911 calls where the person is panicked and they're just frantic. And then the operator or dispatcher is like, I need you to calm down. I can't understand what you're saying. You need to take a breath. The information is not clear if it's erratic. And that's true if you're talking about a 911 situation or you're talking about that team member that sent you the email saying they were going to miss Friday's deadline. All right. So that's item number one. Check, write it down, pause this point if you need some moment to write it down. But effective leaders know how to recognize their emotions without letting the emotion dictate their behavior. Got it? Okay, let's go to point number two. Point number two is that leaders know how to create psychological safety when they respond instead of reacting. Now, this one is a little bit of a tricky situation because, quite frankly, you should always be creating psychological safety within your team. All right. When something happens, people are going to look to you for those emotional cues during those challenging situations. And quite frankly, however you respond emotionally, that's how they are going to respond as well. For those of you that are in high customer service situations where you're having to hear people complain all the time, part of your training, I'm sure, and if it's not, it should be, is no matter what the customer is doing, screaming, yelling, vulgar, whatever, you stay calm, you keep your tone even keel, because there's been study after study after study that has shown that whenever you remain calm, the person will eventually come down to your level, and then you can have a conversation. You want the people on your team to come down from their emotional state so that way there can be a conversation. You have embraced the fact that they're highly emotional. You've now created this psychological safety within their midst. They trust you, and now we can have a conversation and then move forward. So an example with this would be, let's say you've got somebody on your team that comes to you and says, I made a huge mistake. It's going to cost us a few $1,000s. A reactive response is for you to scream and yell at them. You could call them out on the next meeting. You could keep bringing it up and holding it against them. But the responsive approach is more or less for you to tell that person, all right, you know what? I appreciate you letting me know. I'm not happy about it, but let's talk through why this occurred and how can we make sure that we don't do this going forward. So let me ask you this, and this is your moment to kind of pause and reflect. When people on your team bring you bad news, do they expect judgment or do they expect support? Now, there is a line here. Don't get me wrong. If somebody is not doing their job or they're not performing the way that they should be performing, then there is a proper or should be a proper procedure for this person to have their behavior corrected. You put them on a performance improvement plan. And if it's just not working out, then you have to let them go. But if it's a one-time thing, this person's been on your team for 5 years and this is just something that had happened to have flared up, you don't want to have a temporary emotion damage the relationship that you've built. And there is research that shows that leaders who can regulate their emotional expressions are going to positively influence employee engagement, commitment, and morale during periods of uncertainty and disruption. All of those things are necessary for your organization to continue to operate in the black and to have an ROI. If you do not create this employee engagement, if you don't have employee commitment and you have low morale, your organization is not going to thrive. And every appreciation program under the sun and you telling them thank you 1,000 times over is not going to move the needle. Okay. So again, this doesn't mean that you become robotic, but it is important for you as a leader to pick your battles. Because quite frankly, if everything is a major issue that you blow up on, is anything a major issue? They're going to start to tune you out and you will become Charlie Brown's teacher. Okay. And you don't want that. So that's item number 2. If you need to pause this and write it down, feel free. Item number 2, leaders create psychological safety when they respond instead of react. Got it? Cool. We have 2 more. Item number 3 that I want for you to take away from this episode is that responding reduces escalation and workplace conflict. So when you have an emotional reaction, you are automatically going to trigger a defensiveness, and they're going to respond defensively whenever they decide to respond to you. Okay. This reactivity is going to create a cycle of conflict and blame and withdrawal. Whereas if you have a calm response, this is going to automatically de-escalate tension and help preserve the relationship that you have with this person. Okay. So let me give you an example. Let's say you are, in a team meeting and all of a sudden somebody is going to challenge your decision as the leader. You could become reactive and say, just become really defensive and say, well, we're not going to talk about it. Or even worse, you just be like, you know what, we're ending the meeting, we're done. That's a very reactive response. And it shows everybody else that you don't want to hear what other people have to say, that you don't want to have a conversation concerning any sort of conflict. And you are going to damage anybody possibly coming to you and bringing you ideas that you need to hear about that are conflicting with what you thought to be true. So a better approach to this particular situation is to ask that person clarifying questions. So you can ask them, can you elaborate on that? Help me to understand where you're coming from. Was there something that happened that causes you to have this perspective? Whenever you ask these type of questions, it shows that you're seeking to understand and you're inviting constructive dialogue, not just between you and that other person, but with everybody on your team, because that person could then clarify what was going on. Somebody else on your team jumps in and says, oh yeah, I had that experience too. And now we can have a more productive conversation to resolve whatever issue it is that's going on. So I have a challenging question that I want for you to be honest with you about, that I want you to be honest with yourself about, I should say. Do your responses create more heat or do they create clarity? And I'm always trying to give you some research with it. This is not just my opinion. Like there's actual people that have researched these things. And it says that behaviors significantly influence workplace aggression, incivility, and interpersonal conflict. So whenever you have emotionally regulated leadership, you are going to create a healthier work environment. You're going to create healthier interactions with your team, and you're going to reduce those overall destructive behaviors that can occur if you as the leader are reacting instead of responding. All right. And then our 4th and final item I want for you to think about. And then I'm going to give you some tips on how you can actually shift your perspective from being more of a responsive person instead of a reactive person. So the last and final thing, and you guys know that my whole point of having this podcast is to help you reduce burnout and fatigue in your work environment. When you respond instead of react, you are going to reduce your own levels of potential burnout. If you are constantly reacting, you are keeping yourself in a state of chronic stress. Emotional regulation is going to help conserve that mental energy that you have, and it's going to help you really improve resilience for no matter what is going to possibly occur. If you expect to be a sustainable leader in your role, you're going to have intentional management of your own emotional resources. We only have so much bandwidth every single day. And if you deplete them constantly, you're putting more stress on your body than is needed. Your cortisol levels are higher than they need to be. Your fight or flight is in a constant state. You could develop adrenal fatigue. You're going to make yourself more exhausted. Like it, all bad things. Okay. So, an example of this is, let's say you've got people that are constantly coming to you because they're complaining about changes that are happening within the organization. You could absorb every single frustration, be the person to try to fix every single problem, personally respond to every single issue. That will keep you in a state of chronic stress. A more responsive approach and a more productive approach is for you to ask this person, so how can I help you resolve this situation? How does this pertain to me helping your stress life to be lower? You've got to get people involved in the decision-making process because there are plenty of people that are more than happy to drop their emotional baggage at your door and expect for you to always be the one to take care of it. Let me tell you, I did that for the first couple of years in my professional life and I was miserable. And it wasn't until I finally understood I do not have to be the end all be all savior problem fixer for everybody else that I finally was able to get to a place where I could be a lot more effective. And then whenever people start to own the solutions and they start to come up with these ideas, you have a greater chance of them actually being implementing and for them to stick and for them to actually work. So I'm curious to know how much of your exhaustion comes from the problems themselves and how much comes from your reaction of somebody else mentioning the problem. Okay. If you can really grasp this idea, and this is my research insight for you with this particular topic, if you can grasp this idea, you are going to lower your daily stress and you are going to have more improved effectiveness no matter what else happens to be going on around you. And this is especially true if you are in situations of change and disruption. People, as much as they want to complain about the status quo, when you start implementing changes, there will be more complaints. So you've got to learn to understand this is not my emotional baggage to carry. I'm happy to help you. I'm happy to support you. I'm happy to help, come up with some ideas that I can support you to implement the solution on. But this is not my emotional baggage to carry. Okay. So you might be sitting here thinking, all right, Rachel, this is all well and good in theory, but I don't know how I can go from being a reactive person to being a responsive person because I've always just kind of reacted. I feel like I need to have that answer right there on the bat, and I don't know how to kind of take a step back. Well, I'm going to give you a very simple acronym that you can remember, and it should be no surprise at all, but I want for you to think of the acronym PAUSE. So each of these letters are going to stand for something, okay? Real quick. The P in pause, no surprise. Literally, I want you to pause. I want you to take a breath. I want you to delay immediate action as much as you possibly can. This doesn't mean that you avoid the situation. This doesn't mean that you become an ostrich and stick your head in the sand and pretend it's not there. No, no. If you need to not respond to that email right now, or even at a minimum, if you need to say, thank you for bringing this to my attention. Give me a day or so to think about it. I will have an answer for you by Thursday. Do that because with time and with sleep and with stepping away from a situation, you can actually get clarity. So pause, take a breath, take a moment to kind of understand what's going on, and then you can decide how you want to proceed forward. Okay, so that's the P. The A in pause is to acknowledge. I want for you to be honest with yourself and actually acknowledge the feeling that you are having without judging yourself, without being critical of yourself. If you're mad, tell yourself, man, this really ticks me off. Or, wow, I'm really aggravated. Or, oh man, I'm so excited about this idea. Make sure that you acknowledge whatever emotion is going on, because if you can't clearly identify it, it's going to trip you up later on down the road. Okay. The U in our pause acronym is I want for you to understand the situation. So I need for you to ask questions. What information are you missing? What else do you need to know? Who else do you need to go talk to? What part was not clear? Like, I want for you to really and truly understand and ask those questions, what's going on, so that way you can respond in an effective manner. The S is I want for you to select your response. So what response aligns with your goals? What response aligns with your values? What response aligns with your desired outcomes? Because if you don't select those, if you don't select that option that aligns with your goals, your values, and your outcomes, you're going to create what psychologists call cognitive dissonance, and it's going to be a bigger issue for you in the long run. And then finally, the E in our pause acronym is I want for you to evaluate. So, how did your response go? Did you really and truly provide clarity? Did you create that psychological safety? Should you have responded a little bit sooner? Maybe you should have taken more time. Think about how you responded and then just tell yourself, okay, should I be in this situation again? Here's what I want to do instead going forward. All right. So pause, acknowledge, understand, select, and then evaluate. We all are going to have situations that we're not going to like. We're all going to have things that we're going to have to do that we don't really want to do. We all have people that we work with that we probably don't really care to work with. But I never want for you to let your emotions dictate how you respond. And remember, you never, 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 never want to respond if you are hungry, angry, or tired. First and foremost, if you find yourself just kind of having that emotional pull, stop and ask yourself, hold on, did I feed myself? Have I slept? And am I already in an emotional state? And this is just piling on. It's going to make it worse. So go take your lunch, go to bed at night, go take a walk if you need to, take a nap on your lunch break if you can, right? So I say all of this to say this. Leadership is not about eliminating your emotions. And I hope you know my heart whenever I say that, but it is about managing your emotions wisely. People rarely remember decisions that the leaders make, right? Like there's 10, 15 years from now, they're going to be like, I don't really remember everything, but I do remember that Rachel was really calm during that situation. Or Rachel, I don't remember what she said, but she brought me a lot of clarity whenever she made that particular comment. Every interaction that you have with people gives you a choice. You can either react with emotion or you can respond with intention. The most trusted leaders are not those people that never feel frustrated, never feel disappointed, never feel stressed. And if you have a leader that tells you that they never have those feelings, they're lying. Okay. And you don't want to work for a lying leader. That's a whole nother episode, which I think I just now have. But the leaders who create enough space between emotion and action and choose their responses wisely, those are the leaders that we really want to try to emulate. So if you found this information valuable, all of my social media information and website can be found in the show notes. Feel free to connect with me if you want to connect and be inspired. If you liked what you heard, if you're a newbie, hit the subscribe button. I do try to post on the second and the fourth Tuesday of every single month, so you can kind of know when those episodes are going to be coming. Follow me on social media. I'm on all the major platforms. So just, check in. And if you've got any ideas, if there's something that you would like to hear for the next episode, please don't hesitate to reach out. I love hearing from people. I love kind of troubleshooting some issues that might be going on with your own workplaces. And I just want to leave you with this. I do believe that you are made to be a leader right where you are, wherever you're leading. And I do believe the topics we talked about can help strengthen the roots of your leadership so you can weather any storm. Take care of yourself, take care of your team. You can 1000% do this. And until next time.